of Jesus, and you hear the music playing, and you see the people praising. Just forget about your worries, let your troubles fall behind.
Theme for this year is faith forward, how to get unstuck, right? So because we've been thinking about where we've been at in this world, we've been thinking about where we've been at in the pandemic, we've been thinking about how it is, as I said in the mission moment, are we going to move forward from this place that we now find ourselves in? And so we're going to move forward with faith forward, getting unstuck, and we've been looking at these foundational stories in Genesis, because what we have seen so far is that every place God's people get stuck, God comes and pushes them forward with faith. And so we started with Adam, and we saw, right there in the garden, Adam and Eve, they got stuck, right? And God fixed that one up fast, but, Noah, God's plan B, the second Adam in some ways in the Old Testament, gets off the ark and got what? Stuck. Stuck in a bottle of wine. Right? Didn't we see that? And so God pushed forward through Shem's lineage, and that brought us to Abraham. Now, Abraham was stuck in a pagan land called Ur, sometimes called the land of the Chaldeans, sometimes called Babylon. And he was stuck there, and under the stars, God told him to go forward in faith. And, he just kept getting stuck, didn't he? Yeah, he got stuck. And then we had Jacob. We spent 2 sermons talking about Jacob, because Jacob is the foundational story of Genesis, really. Right? Out of Jacob comes Israel. Israel is Jacob's new name, right? Jacob means liar, and Israel means one who contended or fought with or was overcome by Yahweh, by God. And in Jacob, we saw that there were 2 lineages, one under Leah and one under Rachel. Now, this is foundational for today's message on Joseph, believe it or not. You see, remember, as we go back and think about what we already covered, Rachel, Jacob loved. Leah, how shall we say this? Not so much. God equaled it out by giving the one not so much more to love. Look at the lineage tree, right? And the one who didn't have much to love, or the one who was loved much, didn't get many children. And then there's this gray column in the middle. That's the Abraham problem. The concubines, right? Now, I want you to notice the chart that Judah is highlighted, because Judah will become the lineage for Jesus. And I want you to also notice on the other side, Joseph is highlighted. Now, Benjamin, I've soft highlighted, because you know who he is, right? He's the lineage of King Saul. So I can't say that he didn't become a king, but he doesn't become, he becomes an important king, just not the king we're going to focus on. But this story, Joseph's story, is deeply tied to Judah. And we need to understand that as we go forward into the story. It's deeply tied to Judah, and we need to understand that these are 2 different kinds of kings in a way. One from Leah, the less loved, and one from Rachel, the most loved. And what do you think happens when you have one wife more loved than the other wife more loved? Guys, this is why polygamy is not a good deal. Polygamy will always get you into trouble. And so the Bible says that Jacob loved Joseph more. It does say that because he was younger, and that's true. But it's kind of interesting, the family tree, right? You can see that God has tried to bring equality to this family. But you can see what unexamined biases does. You can see what happens when you don't think through your own tendencies. So Jacob, just like Abraham before him with Ishmael and Isaac, creates this power struggle within the family. And so Joseph thinks he's the most important. After all, he's most loved by dad. God is giving him dreams. And of course, this is going to cause contention with his family. You know, he's the youngest, and he's, from that, how shall we say it, second wife. And so, the children of Leah get together when they see Joseph coming, and they're like, this kid, you're going to come down here and start bragging on us again? Let's kill him. That's what they said. I mean, he's from the second wife anyways, right? Why should he get our inheritance? Why should he get God's favor? Why should he get Dad's attention? Parents, merged, blended, fixed families, or fine families, you must guard against perceived inequalities expressed towards multiple children in your family. Because it is in the family that children develop their personalities that they carry with them for life. But thank God for Reuben. Thank God for Reuben. And thank God for Judah. And I told you, Judah and Joseph are the two kids to watch here. They seek to save the intolerable. And Joseph is intolerable. He's like, I had a dream from God. You all going to bow down to me, and you're all going to be serving me, and it's going to be great, guys. Why aren't you getting excited? Like, I don't get it. Like, and Dad gets it. Like, he gave me this coat. Like, and after all, I am from the mom that's loved. Words matter. Words matter. But there's something in Judah, there's something in Reuben. And in Genesis 37, it says that Reuben began to speak. Don't shed any blood. Just throw him into this cistern, into this pit here in the wilderness. We'll just leave him here to die. But don't lay a hand on him. Why should we get blood on our clothes, right? But Reuben said this because he was secretly planning to come back and get him and bring Joseph to the protection of his father, right? And Judah's right with him. Judah's right with him in verse 26. Judah's like, yeah, what will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Then it's going to we're going to have to live with that. And so he's like, come now, let's at least profit from this little, what they probably said. Lamb, right? Come, let's profit from this little lamb. least if we sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him, we won't have his blood on our hands. And hey, we might even make a profit. Sometimes greed is a good negotiation tool. And his brothers actually concede to this point. And so they sell him, and, Joseph ends up being sent with the Ishmaelites to Egypt to become a slave. And poor Jacob pays the price. He is shattered. He is heartbroken. He is damaged. But I want you to see, okay? I want you to see he is the architect of his own damage. You see, so often when we have family breakdowns, so often when we have family conflicts, so often when we have family damage, we're so quick to blame the other person. After all, why didn't the other boys protect him? How did he get eaten by the bear? But he probably doesn't even see. He's the architect of the inequality. Well, I guess he could blame Laban. But God tried to equalize it out. And here's the thing. Please be with me today. Please, there's always someone you can blame in your family for the dysfunction. But it takes a person of integrity to own it, to change it, and fix it. Jacob is suffering because of Rachel's child. Meanwhile, in Egypt, he gets a pretty good gig for a slave. He gets to, work in Potiphar's house. And Potiphar, he's pretty rich, and Potiphar, treats him really well, and he's a faithful servant or slave, and so Potiphar, rewards him well, and, after all, apparently the scenery wasn't bad either at Potiphar's house. You're with me this morning, right? There was nice scenery at Potiphar's house. Potiphar's wife felt the same way about the new addition to the staff. Now, Jacob's got a problem of collecting too many wives, and Joseph does not have that problem. He knows how to run. And there are times to marry and times to run. And wise men and women know the difference. And he runs. But even doing the right thing is no guarantee of the right outcome. You see, that's the other thing we like to say to God, right? We like to say, why did this happen to me? I was faithful. I did the right thing. Who told you that being faithful and doing the right thing ensured a perfect life? Just because you do the right thing, just because you're faithful, doesn't mean that everyone around you will be. Now, a few too many weeks ago, I stood here and I told you guys about the isolation of being locked in a jail. And y'all looked at me like, Pastor, what are you talking about, man? I said, I remember the first time I ever went into jail, and I walked through those cell doors, and I heard them smash together, and you can hear that smash throughout the whole building. It's like, da-dang, yang, 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 yang. Y'all looking at me like, You got something you need to disclose to us? Jail is both the most insecure place you can be and at the same time, the most lonely place you can be. In jail, you can be in a crowd, but you prefer to be alone because the crowd is dangerous in jail. But the isolation is soul-crushing in jail. And so people in jail choose between the danger of the yard and the soul-crushing isolation of the cell. And the worst possible punishment that they do give out is called solitary confinement. When you have a prisoner who's really rowdy and they won't settle down, they get solitary confinement. In jail, we call that the hole. You get put in a small room that barely fits you with nothing but a blanket. And you're left there for whatever the duration of your time is. When I was a social work student, hear me out here. When I was a social work student, one of the things that I took up with, this is one of my exposures to Christianity, and I'm not going in that side story. But it's before I was a Christian, I teamed up with a church as a social work student so I could get experience working with people who are in jail. And so before I was even a pastor, before I was even a Christian, the church was sending me into the jail to do chaplaincy work. Weird, right? Or providence, one of the two. And I sat with many young offenders. They started me out with the young offenders. And they were so broken. They were stuck between being terrified and empty and alone. So when I think back to the many years, I told you I went to jail many times, and this is true. In fact, I was actually too young to qualify at this stage in my life to go into a provincial, I lived in Canada, into a provincial institution, and they had to make an exception for me. And I remember when I transferred from young offenders to adults, and you're going up there and you're going down that hallway, and those doors are clanging, 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 and everybody's hooting and hollering. It's an easy place to get lost in. I don't mean directionally. I mean, you can go to jail for shoplifting and meet people and plan a kidnapping or a bank robbery or an armed robbery. And you can find out all the details about how to do it because you're at like criminal university. And then they're going to let you go out when you're done. And the only thing you'll have now is probably a record in a criminal education. And that's the reason I'm proud of Joseph. Joseph took his time in isolation and he turned it into an opportunity. Joseph didn't say, like, by the way, when you go into a jail, everyone is innocent, nobody did it. I don't know how they all get in jail, but everyone's innocent and nobody did it. And sometimes it's true. More than we want to believe. But Joseph didn't do, I'm innocent. He looked for opportunities to serve and help other people. And those opportunities to serve and help other people get him a new job, now with Potiphar, but with the Pharaoh. And notice, he doesn't get all upset. He doesn't be like, hey, let's put, now that me and you, Pharaoh, are tight, and you see the kind of good things I can do for you, and you see that I give you wisdom, and you see that all of Egypt is prospering, and you have now made me the prime minister, and that's what I mean by king. Joseph becomes the prime minister to the Pharaoh. Joseph doesn't say, let's go get Potiphar, and let's set his wife right. You see, because when you move on, you don't go back. Faith forward means the past is dead. The past may identify where you came from, but it's not where you live. When you go back to the past, even when you have the power to go back to the past, when you go back to the past, all you do is get stuck. And so Joseph is a great example of faith forward. Faith forward. Forward right into the dreams of the Pharaoh. So the Pharaoh has a dream. Pharaoh's very concerned about this dream. Pharaoh's like, hey, Joseph, remember your job interview? And we were talking about the baker and the cupbearer and the dreams that they had. Well, I got my own dream problems. You just imagine Joseph being like, well, come in and lay down on my couch. Tell me your problems, Pharaoh. Joseph defers to God and the wisdom that God has given him. And at that moment, Joseph understands. At that moment, are you hearing me? Joseph understands every mistake he ever made. At that moment, he understands what the dreams of his youth were about. You see, we could preach a whole sermon series on being a dreamer like Joseph. His whole life is about dreams and visions, his and others. And now he knows at this moment why he saw his brothers bowing down to him. And he has to decide, is he going to not only let Potiphar and his wife off the hook, but will he let his brothers off the hook? Because he can see from Pharaoh's dream where faith forward is taking him. Sometimes God can't show you where he's taking you because he can't trust you yet to see where you're going. But one of the things I love about Joseph is God can trust him to see where he's going. Because why? He's going forward and he ain't going back. And so the famine comes and, Joseph is being a good prime minister, and he's strategically lining up the resources of the kingdom. And he knows how far-reaching this will be. He knows who's going to come knocking. Are you with me? He has time to scheme. He has time to plot revenge. And he certainly has good cause. Because isn't that how it always is when we're trying to get back at somebody? When we don't want to go forward, but we want to go backwards. A good sign that you're not moving forward is when you're playing out in your mind all the different ways you can play the scenario you know about now. That's a good sign you're living in the past. Faith forward means you're trusting God. It's faith forward, not scheming forward. It's faith forward, not revenge forward. It's faith forward. Not my will forward. And so I do love the way Joseph handles this, and that's a whole nother sermon, and we got to choose with Joseph Live which sermon we're preaching. Are you with me today? But I love that he knows from the beginning what he's going to do, but he plays with his brothers. You hear me? He plays with his brothers. It's kind of like wrestling with your brother. I mean, you want to give him a few good noogies to the head, but you don't want to really cave in the head. And so Joseph is like, where's Benjamin? You know why he's asking, where's Benjamin, right? You know why, right? Because you saw the chart, right? You know who Benjamin is, right? He's the only other child of Rachel, the loved one. And he wants Leah's children. Are you with me? He wants Leah's children to hear him say, where's the last favorite one's child? See, they don't know that it's Joseph. He's letting the conviction of what they have done to the house of Rachel fall upon Rachel's children, or Leah's children. And there's this whole game he plays, sending them back and forth. And there's this whole thing with the silver cup, which is, a whole nother sermon. But the point is, he's looking for a reckoning. A what? A reckoning. A reckoning is okay. A reckoning is not vengeance. A reckoning is wanting to reorder it. A reckoning is making people be accountable. And by the way, there is nothing wrong with holding people accountable. But accountability doesn't come out of a place of revenge. And yeah, we got to admit, the favorite child of Rachel puts those Leah lambs in a few very good headlocks. When he's got them really tight in the headlock, he brings them real close. And he whispers in their ear, come close to me. Come close to me. And when they've done so, he says, I am your brother. Joseph. Here comes the accountability, right? The one you sold. There's a high cost to slavery. You caught the title at the beginning, right? There has to be accountability for slavery, right? There has to be an accountability for doing things wrong in the past. And Joseph is holding them accountable for treating a brother like someone to sell. I am your brother. Yeah, that one. Yeah, that one. Yeah, you got it. Yeah, the one you sold into slavery. Yeah, I'm the prime minister. Like, he is like right now in the place where he could go, whoa. But he's faith forward. And then he threw his arms around who? Who's Benjamin? His full brother. He throws his arms around Benjamin, and Benjamin embraced him, weeping. And he kissed who? All his brothers, and wept over them. Afterwards, his brothers talked with him. Wouldn't you like to have a security camera in that conversation? That would have been interesting to see up close. But we got to move on, and here's the conclusion of Joseph's thought process. To his brothers. Whose? Joseph's. For you meant for evil. You meant evil against who? Me. For you meant evil against me, but God meant it for what? Good, to bring about what? That many people should what? Be kept alive as they are what? Today. And he doesn't just mean the 12 brothers. Because all of Egypt would have been lost. And starved. So he says, what you meant for evil, God meant for what? Good. Now, listen to me, because we're going to bring this baby home. Just because somebody does something for evil, and just because God reaches down and takes what someone did for evil and uses it for good, doesn't mean that God endorsed the evil. And that's got to be clear here. And if it's not, don't worry, God's about to make it clear. God is in the business of taking other people's evil. God, all the way back to sermon number 1 this year, takes chaos and reorders it. God takes brokenness and completes it. God takes our sticking place and unsticks it. God is in the business of faith forward. And the whole point is, when Joseph says this, he's not even talking about his brothers. He's not even talking about Egypt. He's talking about you and me. Because had Judah starved to death out on the peninsula, there would have been no lineage for Jesus to come from. Understand that God took Joseph and made him a different kind of king, so we wouldn't lose the real King Jesus. That doesn't mean that God couldn't have made Joseph a prime minister in Egypt any way he wanted to. God is forever reorganizing our chaos. And I want to talk to you just a couple more minutes. We can be forgiven from sin. Do you hear me? We can be forgiven from sin. And sometimes when we're forgiven from sin, we get forgiven from consequences. What did I say? Sometimes. Sometimes some consequences. No one will ever be forgiven at any time without somebody paying the price. There is no such thing as forgiveness without justice. Someone has to pay the price. You see, 430 years is not enough years for God to forget what Leah's children did to Joseph. And I don't want you to miss this point in the narrative that is not often talked about. But a nation that builds its identity on slavery is going to be forever damaged by what it did. And it doesn't mean that God can't forgive and that people can't forgive. But forgiveness doesn't always mean releasing people from all consequences. Now, I looked into the Jewish rabbis on this issue. And we know that slavery of Israel doesn't begin in the beginning of this 430 years that they are in Egypt. But we will see when we go to Moses, we're going to Moses, we will see they are going to end up in slavery. Someplace in this 430 years. God is like, I have forgiven you. God is like, I still love you. God is like, you're still my chosen one. Hear me, church. Hear me. God is like, you're still the one I am going to save the world through. Hear me, church. You are still the one that my prophecies are going to unfold about. Hear me, church. You are still the one that is going to be the focus of the future. But that doesn't mean I'm letting you away from all consequence. The rabbis think by calculating the ages of people that they know when they die of. They think they enjoyed about 100 years of the high living of Egypt before the Egyptians began to enslave them. You can see it coming from the beginning, like I don't have time to go into all of it, but you can read it. One of the things the Pharaoh says to Joseph is, hey, I hear your kin are pretty good with sheep, and we don't really like dealing with sheep. Any of your brothers want to look after my sheep? You see how this is starting already, right? You see? You see? It's not that they're not forgiven. Joseph put his arms around them. He kissed them. He cried on them. He gave them a good life. He gave their children a good life. Probably their children's children a good life. It's not that this is necessarily a direct punishment as much as it is what they themselves forged in cause and effect. This is why, as we close out looking at Genesis, and as we go faith forward into a brave new world, we must assess our past, but leave it alone and move forward. And God is still, we have to trust that God is going to hold people accountable. And the God, the biblical God, not the fairy tale God, but the biblical God bears the biggest burden, right? He bears the biggest burden. But sometimes there are still consequences. And those consequences are not God taking vengeance, because full vengeance is on the one that Joseph saved, Judah, Jesus. Those consequences are simply so, God's people don't keep making the same sin. Are you with me this morning? Don't pray just because you're forgiven. Just because you're forgiving, don't pray every consequence away. Sometimes we need, and God knows what we need, we don't know. But sometimes we need just enough consequence so that we're not quick to go back down that same path again. And sometimes it's like, I don't know why God chose about 100 years in, according again to the rabbinical traditions, of their time in Egypt to remind them. But sometimes the hard moment in your life comes so God can prepare you to receive the message of Moses. The message of building something better. That's what Moses is about. Moses is going to build a nation, an identity. Moses is going to take all this dysfunction, and Moses is going to be the one, and I have to believe these stories, the pain of these stories were passed down. Because Moses is not only going to be like the George Washington of Israel, he's also going to be the one who chronicles their failures. And as you saw today, doesn't pull punches. Our God, like the team saying, is mighty to save. Let's trust him also to hold us where he needs to hold us. To remind us of the past. Are you with me now? Watch. To remind us of the past, to keep us out of the past. When people say to you, don't forget where you come from, it's so you don't go back. God will hold you to consequences enough. He's merciful. He saved Judah for a reason. But he'll remind you enough to keep you longing for that old sin pattern. Let's give it to Jesus. Let's listen to the team.
You hear me when I call. You are my morning sun. No darkness fills the night. It cannot hide the light. Whom shall I fear? You crush the enemy underneath my feet. You are my sword and shield. No trouble linger still. Whom shall I fear? Whom shall I fear? I know who goes before me. side, the one who reigns forever. He is a friend of mine. The God of angel armies is always by my side. My strength is in your name, for you alone can save. You will deliver me. Yours is the victory. Whom shall I fear? Whom shall I fear? I know who goes before me. I know who stands behind. The God of angel armies is always by my side. The one who reigns forever. He is a friend of mine. The God of angel armies is always by my side. And nothing formed against me shall stand. You hold the whole world in your hands. I'm holding on to your promises. You are faithful. You are faithful. And nothing formed against me shall stand. You hold the whole world in your hands. I'm holding on to your promises. You are faithful. You are faithful. You are faithful. I know who goes before me. I know who stands behind. The God of angel armies is always by my side. The one who reigns forever. He is a friend of mine. The God of angel armies is always by my side.
Where you come from, it's a part of what makes you who you are. And you know, I don't buy into that fairy tale stuff. You know that about me, right? Like I don't buy when people tell me this rubbish. I'd like to use another word, but you know, when people tell me this rubbish that if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't do it any different. Baloney. When I hear people say that, I hear people either telling themselves a fairy tale or never having reckoned out their own sin. Because this is the heart of a true repentant person. If I had to do it all over again, I would trust Jesus this time. See, we can't change what happened. We can't change that it's made us who we are. But if we don't change why it happened, it keeps happening. God wants us to stop at this moment. He's putting us in a little cell inside of Egypt to come to terms with why it happened. Because it doesn't need to keep happening. It's the only reason he saved Judah. He saved Judah because it doesn't have to keep happening. Thank God for Joseph. Thank God for Joseph. Thank God even for Jacob, that when he got shafted by Laban, he didn't give up on true love. He got Joseph. We only needed Jodah, mixing their names together. I'm making a new term here. Maybe it's a new theology. We only needed Judah to be saved. He didn't have to marry Rachel. But you see, God sees things on a whole different level than us. And he saw that he would use even the stubbornness of Jacob's favoritism to save you and me. Look, stop blaming your parents. Don't even blame their parents. It is what it is. It is what it is. Thank God that Joseph saved Judah. Otherwise, it might have had to go to Benjamin. You know how that would have worked out. Read 2 Samuel. We have a Savior. We need to remember what happened in the past. You can't forget it. But faith forward, unstuck. Faith forward, unstuck. Faith forward. Let us pray. Jesus, help us be unstuck. Thank you for Joseph. Thank you that he saved Judah. Thank you that he saves us. Amen.
I know who goes before me. I know who stands behind. The God of angel armies is always by my side. The one who reigns forever. He is a friend of mine. The God of angel armies is always by my side. And nothing formed against me shall stand. You hold the whole world in your hand. I'm holding on to your promises. You are faithful. You are faithful. You are faithful. I know who goes before me. I know who stands behind. The God of angel armies is always by my side.